All right, there we go. Mr. President, are you ready for us to begin?
We are ready.
All right, trustees, please welcome to the December 1st Georgetown ISD Board Workshop. Cannot believe it is the last board workshop of the calendar school year 2025. So here we are already at the midpoint of the year. We actually do not have any public comment today. And we have a relatively full agenda. There's a lot of meaty work for us to talk through. And so really look forward to the dialogue about the work happening in the school district, feedback from the board, and think about how can we continue to get sharper as a district leadership team. We're going to talk about principal hires, our high priority school support, board budget parameters and priorities, budget workshop number 1. We're going to talk about the school year calendar for next year, attendance zoning update, and then lastly, inform the board about a cell phone tower lease opportunity that we have in front of us. First, I'd like to introduce our new principals, new-ish principals that will be at our schools. First, for elementary school, number 12, someone we know very well is Dr. Emily Frazier, the current principal at McCoy Elementary. Emily is here with her husband, and sir, in advance, we apologize for how much time we're going to take from your family, but we're real grateful for Dr. Frazier and the work she's going to do, continue to do for us. And joining us from Austin ISD is Michael Coyle, who will be the principal of middle school number 5. So, Michael, excited you could join us tonight. Thank you for being here, and we've just heard nothing but great things, not only from the interview committee, but from several of your references, and we called them all. So, and then lastly, our interim principal at Pearl Elementary will be Holly Pazos, who is one of our star assistant principals currently at San Gabriel Elementary. And having a head full of steam, of course, she spent a good time of Thanksgiving break at Pearl Elementary. So just a little bit. So trustees, before we get into this conversation about high priority school support, this term, high priority schools, is something that we really developed, in the last 2 years in terms of supporting schools that may have a couple different factors. First of all, there could be an opportunity gap. When we say opportunity gap, where they could be performing and where they're currently performing. But also some very real challenges that families that are zoned to those schools may be experiencing that require a degree of additional support in order for students to be more successful. And so as we talk about how we're providing that support, I just want to be very straightforward about something. None of this is saying, oh, look at everything we're doing and isn't this perfect? What this really is this is a conversation about here is how we have carefully thought through what support that is proportional to the need looks like for these schools. And we really invite the questions and conversation to just really think about, are we thinking about all the angles, or are there ways we can better inform the board and then by proxy the community about ways we can best support our schools so that every child in Georgetown ISD is successful as possible. So the first thing I want to do is just talk about our elementary schools. And so the schools highlighted at the bottom are what we term our high priority schools. And so I know you can read, but I'm just going to talk through these columns real quick. The first column, the school name, and then we have the actual student population in parentheses. The percentage of students who are on free and reduced lunch, and the actual number of students that represents at each school. The percentage of special ed and the actual number of students that are in special education. How many assistant principals are at each school? How many instructional coaches? How many interventionists? And then with behavior support, how many teachers and then paraprofessionals are there to support with, to be there to support with either general education or special education behavior. And then lastly, we have the addition of the Literacy First program, which is there to ensure that every kid has the additional resource to get to where they need to be reading on grade level. Just going to give you and I know, we previewed these slides to the board in advance, but I want to give you a moment to just take it all in, or for our viewing audience to see it.
Is there a rhyme or reason to, like, number of APs per student, or ICs, or interventionist, or like what are y'all basing that staffing count on?
So we do have a staffing formula, but then it comes to really looking at the need of the school. So that's my very layman's way of explaining it. Amanda, no wrong answer. How would you real-time describe how we arrive at those numbers?
Yeah, so assistant principals, just the staffing ratio for elementary is 700 to 1. So when they reach 700, we would add a second. And so you can see for our high priority schools in our conversations last year, we felt like it was important, just based on the need, to leave that second assistant principal, which is outside of our staffing ratio, to help support. So that's just one example.
Right.
And Devin, question. I like seeing more interventionists, obviously, and more assistant principals at the higher priority schools. Is this new that they have more resources like this, or is this just my first time seeing it illustrated like this? Last year, did it look like this? Where, let's say, all 5 of the high priority schools have 1-2 times as many interventionists and assistant principals, or is that part of the turnaround plan?
Lindsay and Amanda, do you mind answering Mr. Blankenship?
Sure. The practice of it being differentiated is not new. There might be some numbers that are a little bit higher than they were last year because of either reflection or principal requests at the end of the year as we considered staffing at the start of the year. We made some small adjustments, particularly in behavior support, intervention, and literacy first. Those numbers there's some campuses with more of that than they have last year.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Amanda, would you add anything?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to say is we, in the past, have worked off of a formula based on free reduced lunch numbers, which is how we looked at staffing our interventionist. And through conversations last year, and just based on feedback from Heather's team and conversations with SLT, we determined that may not be the perfect formula to use to staff. And so in some cases, based off the old formula, some of our high priority schools may only have 2, but we went ahead and added a third based on data that came back. Sometimes things that aren't really on paper or don't show on paper, the principal requests, things like that.
Yeah.
That's how we landed on those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
I will share, Mr. Blankenship, you asked the question of did it look like this way last year? I will share with you that some of those intervention numbers are higher than they were last year, but that was based upon principal requests. When we do the campus support team meetings, we always ask the question at the end of what are some of the things you see that you need that would help you address student outcomes. Okay. And a line we like to use is we don't want to find out at the end of the year a $40,000 request kept you from moving student performance to where it needed to be.
Yeah.
So there have been a few ads in there in the last 6 to 8 months.
Okay. Okay, thank
I
you.
don't have a question, but I have more of a comment. I'm very glad to see that there are more interventionists because the national average of disability is about 15%. So we are way overrepresented in special ed. And there's nothing inherent in qualifying for free or reduced lunch that makes you disabled or not smart. So I am glad that we've added the interventionist who can actually, because I think we have a lot of kids who probably should not be in special ed, and I'm hoping by the time they get into middle school, maybe they'll be on grade level and we can move them on out.
Moving to a prevention model and an intervention model as opposed to waiting until a student is struggling.
That's right.
Right.
Not to get in the weeds or make this conversation more complicated than it needs to be, but I think, no pun intended, but the $1 million question is our allocation of these additional staff where it needs to be. Like, interventionists do important work, instructional coaches do the important work, but are we leading to the results that we want to get to? Because if it isn't,
Right.
then we don't need to do what we've always done. We may need to reassess and reallocate staff and resources in a way that helps support higher student achievement.
Will the middle of the year assessment help?
Oh.
You
We're
figured
about
that
to
out,
get
yeah.
to that in just a second.
So, you may be wondering, with that additional support for schools, like what is the cost to the school districts? If you just look at our high priority schools, we're talking about a total of 4 additional assistant principals, 2 instructional coaches, 4 interventionists, and 8 literacy first staff. That's a total of over $1 million in additional staff for 5 schools. But that does not include the use of discretionary Title I funds or individual campus requests, like if an elementary or middle school wants additional funds for tutoring for their staff.
Right, so this is just out of our general fund.
This is all out of general fund, yes, out of our 199.
And so in a perfect world, we get these campuses right and heading in the right direction and stabilized.
Free this money up.
We'd free this money up and repurpose it for whatever that stabilized platform looked like.
That's correct.
Which some of it may be continuing to support these same areas, some, but may very well something else.
Yeah, I think we have to ask ourselves, are the additional requests leading to improved outcomes? I could give an example, like last year at Wagner Middle School, they asked for the addition of an academic dean. The results showed it, and the work of the academic dean that we observed really lined up with how the principal was operating their school, that we were like, okay, that's a sustainable thing. I think we constantly, especially in these budget lean times, have to ask ourselves, are we seeing the outcomes we intended to see? And if not, do we need to reallocate these funds in different ways that lead to better outcomes for students and staff? I'm gonna hand it over to Heather.
Yes. So I'm going to speak a little bit about what we're even noticing right now in our high priority school support. So last workshop I shared with you that we have a dashboard where I'm able to see how we're spending our time. So from that, since that was new, I was able to go in and look at, okay, how are we spending our time with high priority schools? And over 60% of the support from the teaching, learning, and assessment team is dedicated to these 5 campuses. So when you think about the needs across the entire district, most of our support is going in that direction. Additionally, we have curriculum coordinators at Williams and Frost weekly to plan with teachers, to look at data within the professional learning communities. We also created, and this was for all campuses, but we're getting the most feedback from our high priority schools. We had a math benchmark in late October, early November. Campuses create their own plans, but then when I looked at the data, I saw we also need to create a plan and provide an additional level of resources, so that's not all on the teachers or on the coach or on the admin to figure this out. So for 3rd, 4th, and 5th, we also created that MOI math response, or not MOI, benchmark math response plan. We already spoke to the literacy first at our high priority schools. So far, my team we have about twice a month now, a meeting called the Big Team Meeting. It's everyone in teaching, learning, and assessment. We are meeting at Pearl. We've met at Frost. Coming up is Mitchell and then Williams, where we all go in together and then we disperse out into classrooms all at the same time. And then we come back together and say, what did we see? And what does that mean for our work? It's not about turning to the campus and saying, you need to do this or you need to do that. It's what did we see that we are in control of that we need to make sure is stronger for these campuses? And does that mean something for curriculum? Does it mean additional resources? Does it mean a conversation needs to be had in the next PLC you're attending? All those things coming together. For Pearl, next week on December 9th, we will be out, just a few members of my team and myself and Dr. McWilliams will be at Pearl with Holly, and we're going to visit the classrooms in that same fashion, but literally go into kindergarten, come back to the nest. What did we see? What's the next step? Go to first, come back to the nest. What did we see? Here, Holly, here's something we noticed. Did you see it too? That kind of cadence, so that as Ms. Pazos onboards, we're also making sure that she has her feet under her and she knows come January, this is where your focus needs to be. And then this week, actually tomorrow morning, Dr. Padaville and I will be at Frost with the Wagner Academic Dean. And I'm not sure if Danielle is coming or not, but we'll be over there. They're developing an instructional playbook that we decided after our last visit there, like, let's get really clear and let us help you get really clear about what instruction is going to look like in every classroom, and then what's tight and what's loose, right? There's always things that are going to be tight, and there's going to be things that we can be a little bit looser on. So those are just some coordinator support right now coming from teaching, learning, and assessment. Additionally, all of this is always anchored back in these posters that we shared with you at the beginning of the year. You remember where my name was written like 5 times on things I needed to do? But all of this is anchored back in this. So where were you last year, and then where do you want to go? What does that mean for the work students are doing in the classrooms? What does that mean for teachers? What does that mean for the instructional leadership team? For admin, and then again for the central office teaching, learning, and assessment team. How does this all line up together? Well, we spoke earlier about the campus support teams and sort of the findings. In January, we're setting our campus support team meetings up a little bit differently, where everybody, schools are coming in groups of 4. And they have an agenda already that's set out for them. Are you on track with that, what you set forth in your poster, or are you off track? If you're on track, how will you continue to accelerate student learning and growth? And then how will you adjust if you feel like, you know what, there's some adjustments that need to be made to this plan, and how will you continue to monitor that? Additionally, in our campus support meetings, we do get lots of requests. You know, I need 100 more interventionists and 200 more teachers, and then everything will be solid. And so what we're trying to do is think about what the cost is on that, and what's the, I don't like the term ROI when it comes to students, but what will we get out of that, and is this really going to give us what we need, and is there a focused ask? We can all ask for an additional interventionist, but does the data actually support you having an additional interventionist? Or can we look at your intervention schedules differently and say there's some moving around that we can also do? We've also rewritten our literacy assessments that include an additional writing component to better align with how those questions are asked on STAR, instead of this standalone type of item that we were used to for a long time. Things are more integrated now, and so we're adding that. We created district unit math assessments and then the benchmark. So normally we think about a benchmark assessment in education being at like beginning of the year, middle of the year, and end of the year, but actually the elementary principals requested it to be every 2 to 3 to 4 units depending on the grade level. So we constantly have data coming in right now, which has been really nice to say, okay, we're gonna recalibrate our support and we're gonna move over here now because we spent a lot of time here and it's paying off, but we need to go over here. We've coordinated the support from the curriculum coordinators. We're continuing to address campus requests and the support they're asking for and do some creative problem solving around that. And then when we are seeing that we need to be more directive, we are having those conversations. And so that's been conversations with myself and Dr. McWilliams of, are we seeing the same thing? Does this feel right? And how do we have that conversation with the parties that need to be there? Do you want to add anything to that?
No, perfect. And so this is the agenda for the January campus support meeting that we spoke about. I think invitations for those all went out today. And that's kind of what the agenda for that day will look like. So I'll just give you a minute to process through that.
we are really looking for evidence that campuses have that your plan is working. And if the evidence you have right now doesn't show that, then let us be thought partners with you and with your peers at this January meeting on what else might that look like. What have we not thought of yet, and how can we get there? So now I think we're open to any questions you have about the high priority school support.
How are the high priority campuses receiving this support?
I mean, I'm there very frequently. And sometimes I don't say I'm coming, I'll be honest. Sometimes I just walk by or drive by too. Trying to see who's in here that's a high priority.
Mitchell
Cooper.
You know, I think, I'm gonna read their body.
Maybe I should ask them.
Yeah.
As I say this, I think, I would hope that our principals feel like, they could lean on their supervisor or any of the team to ask for additional support. I also think, the work of closing existing gaps is, really draining. And I think it's tough on their staff, I think it's tough on them, and they walk that line between being supportive to their staff, figuring out how hard to push, when to slow down, and then, you know, just trying to just maintain the pace, of the school year. Is that fair?
Yeah, fair.
Oh, come on up here since you stood up.
Yeah, got it.
I'm just short, that's why I stood up.
My question to Heather was how is the additional support being received on the campus?
Just more?
I know that plans look great and everyone has the best intentions. My question is, how are you actually receiving the support? Are you receiving it as helpful? Are you
So
receiving it as cumbersome? Is it in the way?
I love it. The two of them are out frequently whenever I see Dr. Padavo, and then had board member support come out a couple weeks ago, and I ask the two of them every time when they come to visit, what am I doing that you need me to stop, and what am I not doing that you need me to do? I always ask for the feedback. I want the feedback, so I welcome it, and then I immediately turn around and give it to my staff. The next time I see one of my PLCs or the whole staff, this is what we're told, this is how we're gonna keep pushing, or, you know, we're not doing that anymore. So they're looking for me to tell them, and I want that feedback too. I've not done this before, so I wanna make sure I'm getting it right for my people, so that they're getting what they need from me. But anything that they've told me that needs to change, we're changing now. Like, stop doing that, we're doing this. And they welcome it, they're looking for feedback every day, so. Yeah, and when
I think last week,
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, I just happened to have some time, so I swung by Mitchell and walked, and didn't have time to stop in the office on the way out, but called as my drive to the next school, like, hey, this is what I saw, just wondering about
And
it,
it
but
was addressed 2
wanted to
seconds
flag
later.
it for you. And not in a punitive way, just this is what I saw, and I know you, and that's probably not what you would have expected, and I think it would have changed if you walked in the room. But not everybody knows me yet, and some people did know and changed as soon as I walked in.
Yeah.
So
And when I
good.
walked in, I said, y'all, and they're like, okay, sorry. Like, that's all I have to say. But they knew too, and I'm like, I know you're tired, but I am too. That doesn't mean we stop. So, but they're looking for the feedback, I'm looking for the feedback, so they have big goals besides what I said we must do, so, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie.
You're welcome.
You know, it's been 10 years since I was a principal. I don't know that I could be as skilled as, you know, some of the principals in this room, because, don't take this the wrong way, but 10 years ago, I felt like it was easier for a principal to push, right? And, you know, people talk about how kids have changed, like, you know, since COVID or whatever. It's, like, adults have changed too. The workforce culture has changed, right? And so, what we're really asking of our principals is to be that warm demander, right? You just have to, this is a time for intervention, we have to push, we have to maintain that high expectation, but we also have to maintain, like, keeping our people in the game, right? And that's it's a really hard leadership stance to maintain for them.
Well, I'm not a teacher, but I do have teenagers, so I know probably a lot of crossover in that. How do I push you to your best without making you quit?
Oh, yeah. I can relate on the data end, yeah. Other questions from the trustees?
The heavy lift is we're trying to do a whole system shift, like K through 5 we're trying to shift. Ideally, we get to the end of that hard work, and then we're looking at more focused concentration, your kindergarten, first grade, getting them up to speed, because ideally, the work we're doing should be leading to these cohorts moving on, not having the same gaps, so then it becomes easier for these teachers that poured into the kids like that's the intent of the outcome, right?
That is, and I love that you said that. I'm a firm believer in let's pour a lot into K1 too, while we're strengthening 3, 4, 5, so that this isn't just playing whack-a-mole every time students enter 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade.
Yep.
And then it actually compounds itself and becomes a middle school issue, and then we're always digging ourselves out of a hole.
Absolutely.
So K1-2 has to have the same intensity and focus that 3, 4, 5 has. I couldn't agree with that more.
Yeah, well, and she really loved that comment because she is the elementary expert, and I am not, because I was a secondary person. And if you look at accountability, it's 3, 4, 5 that ends up you get your state rating on, right? And so we'll have conversations, and she'll bring up something about first grade. I'm like, why are we talking about first grade? It's 3, 4, 5. And then, but you made her point.
3, 4,
which
5
is-
is a reflection of.
That's right.
Exactly.
We won't see,
You win
like,
the day.
you know, we saw great kindergarten literacy levels last year. That should pay off in 3 or 4 years.
Right.
But the urgency right now is, especially like, if you think about accountability, it's 4th grade. For every elementary school,
Sure.
it's 4th grade.
But the light at the end of the tunnel is we do this big, heavy organizational work,
That's right.
and then collectively, we all get to, the teachers all get to take a breath, because the work the person before them did will now pay dividends for them. The work they did, pay dividends for the grade ahead.
That's right.
And life becomes better and easier for all these kids.
Right,
And
and we're
teachers.
not
Yeah.
spending so much time trying to close gaps, because we didn't let the gap
Become
grow
unmanageable.
even
Right.
bigger than it was. So we started this talking about opportunity gaps. If we do more about building that background knowledge, those experiential learnings in K1, 2, we set the framework up so that we can really start to accelerate some of that learning as well. We've gotten away from a lot of that as a system with field trips and all of that, just nationally, not,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right,
so.
yeah. Yeah. This was very, very helpful and very comprehensive. Thank you for your work.
Absolutely.
And even after this time, if you have questions about things we presented here, we really invite you to ask, because, you know, what's that saying, iron sharpens iron? You know, and until we get those questions like, well, have we really thought about that? Even this exercise of presenting made us a little bit sharper and like, wait, are we addressing that? Or why is there a gap here? Or et cetera. So one thing, do you mind advancing to the next slide for me? So we talked about, you know, in the grand scheme of things, if we could request to the board, what are additional things we could do a budget amendment for to support our schools? None of these are things that we're asking you to decide upon tonight, but what I wanna do is lay them out there, give us, you know, somewhere in the area of a month to discuss them, for you to ask questions, and then we kind of start to put nuts and bolts behind this, so there's specificity behind it. So these are just big picture ideas, lacking a lot of detail, where we get to talk through them, but our team kind of knows some of these basics. So the first thing we want to talk about is the concept of performance pay stipends for campus leaders. So we would have a structure of, you know, for our high priority schools, meeting an accountability rating of at least a C would result in a certain stipend. Perhaps for all of our schools, there could be a performance pay stipend, but of course the bar would be significantly different depending on the demographics of your school. So I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. Just that concept by itself, I would love to hear your thoughts.
So you're thinking kind of a graduated, kind of like the teacher incentive allotment?
That's correct.
Okay.
And essentially, this whole thing allows us to mirror TIA, but for those who don't get to participate in the incentive allotments.
Not necessarily everyone who doesn't get to it, but
Well,
for the campus
Your
leadership team, the principal.
administrator, yeah. Okay.
And the details behind this could be worked out at a future
Sure,
board
sure.
meeting.
What was the deciding factor behind the 316?
We just put the biggest number out there that we thought could be the max cost. So that you had a clear picture of how much would the district be asking for.
No, which I appreciate, because at some point we have to figure out where the money comes from.
That's correct.
And what the impact of moving or allocating the money is, whether that's reducing general fund or having to find it somewhere else. So it's definitely helpful to see the total impact. When you start looking at these individual stipends, is this something that's kind of putting us in line? We've talked like neighboring districts and incentives for that principals are seeing other places. To me, the intent should be a couple of things. One, incentivize the performance, right? But not, you have to be careful when you incentivize something, because it decentivizes something else, essentially, right? You're gonna shift that focus, and so you have to have a careful consideration. In business, if you incentivize profit, well, now all of a sudden nobody's paying attention to upkeep of your equipment or buildings, because that impacts profit, and they only care about profit because that's what you told them. So there's always a trade-off when we start incentivizing, and so I without knowing more details, that'd be one of my gut concerns is the incentive aligned with what we really want the outcome to be, and what are we unintentionally de-incentivizing by shifting this kind of cost? And then the second thought is, if we're gonna incentivize reward, the other possible incentive from this would be recruiting, right? Trying to bring in the highest quality people to fill some really critical needs, and then retention of people, and so then some kind of structure around the stipend.
First, how long they need to be here before?
I mean, in a business world, you would tie like vesting to it, right? Like you would earn your bonuses and they would vest after 3 years or 5. I don't think that works in y'all's world. But essentially, you could start with year 1, this is the stipend at this campus. Year 2, you would get this. Year 3, you would get this, and do again a graduated type increase, and to encourage the stability and leadership. Because when I look at a lot of these high priority campuses and talk to other board members about them, there's a lot of churn in that leadership, and in any organization, that's tough. Like that retraining, like bringing in that new leader is hard, not just on the leader, but everyone that has to serve in that capacity. So if we're incentivizing something, it has to be bringing in quality leadership, maintaining quality leadership, and increasing the retention of that leadership. And so from my perspective, as long as it aligns in the end to kind of those goals, it feels like it would be almost a no-brainer to try to find the money, and again, then it's the length, right? Is it ongoing forever? Is this money you guys are asking for
Does it chase
for the rest of our lives, or is this?
Does it chase the lowest performing school? You know what I
Right.
mean? There are questions to ask.
Right. Or is this something that will phase out and will reduce over time? Obviously, some of the stipends would stay. But at some point, you're no longer a high priority school. You become a stabilized performing school. And then what does that create long-term budget? And that's your 3, 5, 7, 10, 30-year look, whatever you guys wanna call it. Again, nothing I expect you guys to have answers to, but just all thoughts as we kind of work through this process. But I love the idea of incentivizing and rewarding. It's a hard, pretty thankless job these guys do, so.
We could create a model that reflects some of that feedback and bring it to the board for your consideration, and then continue to whittle at it till it meets something that we think reflects some of this feedback. But you're giving us good feedback, which we haven't thought of either, of the fact that when you incentivize something, it disincentivizes. Yeah.
De-incentivize, I think, yeah.
I
and-
particularly like the fact that you've got the elementary curriculum support up there. I think that it is needed, and it is time for that centralized person to be really focused on the elementary program.
Yes, ma'am, so I didn't get to talk about that, but let's talk about that. So, one request that we would have, and I'm just gonna speak plainly about my 2.5 years in the district. I look at who supports, elementary literacy and math in the school district, and for elementary, it's 2 people. And, all of last year I said, gosh, if we were only in a better financial spot, I would love to add someone. But that penny pinching attitude has kept us from having the support that we need. And so, the idea that someone could be solely dedicated to supporting elementary curriculum support, allows our elementary principals to have another person they can go to, but it also allows, our chief academic officer to not be burning all of her time doing that work when she can take the big picture view and think about how does this work integrate with special education, the needs of students that are emergent bilingual, and everything else that is teaching and learning.
Absolutely, yeah, very important.
And again, that's a max cost we put out there. It's not an exact number of a salary. We just want to put the biggest number out there, so the board has a kind of a visual to work its
Right.
way back from.
So, I know that this isn't necessarily clear right now, but this, let's say $50,000 max cost for high priority school principals. Is this for all the high priority schools? Is this like a collective money?
No, this would be collective money.
Yeah.
So
this
it
isn't-
wouldn't be 50 for one
Okay.
person. That's correct.
Obviously, yeah, that would lower.
Back to the principalship.
Well, and all joking aside, to Stephanie and your comment, is that number divided enough to get us
Yeah,
what
so
we
now
want?
it's more like
Who is this
8,500.
ideal candidate, right? Like, in business, you would bring in, like, if we're doing organizational change, or if we're doing takeover and we're doing a turnaround, you would bring in someone who has succeeded at doing those things, not as an interim, as a permanent position to carry you through a phase of your organization, and you would partner that person with an executive VP in my world, I don't know what you guys would call, it'd be associate principal, okay. It's like an associate principal, you would pair that person that's going to be your stabilized leader, so they have the benefit together. You have a higher incurred cost at the start, but the idea is, the quicker you turn it around, the sooner you can get rid of all this support, the $1,020,000 support cost, and it becomes self-funding over time, and then you have their transition to your leader. In your guys' world, you would have to try to find a principal who's closer to retirement, who's wanting to play the number game for their retirement funding, essentially, and we'd have to make it a big enough delta that coming here made sense for them, so that they could up their high 3, high 5, whatever that formula you guys use is. And so I don't know if $50,000 is gonna move the needle enough.
It's not. I mean,
And
I'll
so-
just speak plainly. If it's a similar sized district or smaller, the delta's big enough. If it's any other school district, the base salary that we're paying our principals at is still under what you're making in, like, let's say a Round Rock or a Leander or an Austin ISD.
Right, so
And
if
so
we,
that 10 isn't gonna it might match.
so what's that number?
We can go back
We can
and
run
run the
those numbers.
numbers.
Find me that number and bring us that number, because if you're asking me for 50 grand and you need 125, and 125 moves us where we wanna be, and it gets us there quicker, like, that is more exciting to me than, okay, let's choke up 50 grand and hope we put the right candidate in place, or that we get the right work from the candidate, the people we have in place, and we reward. I'd much rather spend the money if we know we can move the needle versus kind of shooting on hope. Because we're already looking at a budget impact, I don't think it's that big of a delta. And again, I don't know the rest of the numbers, the rest of it seems like if you have that principal piece figured out, that everyone else is on that team under that person, that they're kind of being rewarded for helping that person achieve the campus goals. And so that should be your, in my opinion, your most highly incentivized, rewarded person. And yes, the support staff needs to come along with it, but it feels like that's out of proportion for what you guys are asking for, in my opinion. I could be way wrong.
Yeah, I mean, what you're putting down is the fact that I don't know if 10 is gonna make a difference to recruit someone here based upon what they might be making in a neighboring district. You're correct.
Yeah, so I would love to see that number. I don't know that we can give you that number, but I would love to see that number. Just so we're having a real conversation.
They might get back and say, it is 50,000 difference. That's the number.
And then they're gonna be like, remember when you asked? Which is fine, I mean, in reality, like, I would just really be curious what you guys feel like, once you look at it, that number is. Because that's, when we're asking big, like, that's asking big. When I think mostly in closed rooms, I tell you guys, hey, ask big and make us say no, make us be the bad guys that are forcing the system to work with or more constraints, right? Don't hesitate to ask. So I really appreciate this ask. Honestly, it's the most bold ask I've seen since I've been on the board. And so it sounds silly to be excited about it, but it shows me you guys are really digging into kind of what those needs that would really move the organization as a whole are.
Well,
And
I
so-
feel like as a board, you're really comfortable with this mindset, which, that we're constantly being agile, right? It's really comforting to think, oh, we have an exact staffing formula, it'll look like this and it'll never change. But I think we have to take an educated gamble on doing something different when the time says it, and then let's figure out how to contract in the right way to get balanced again afterwards. And I'm going to put Rhonda and Heather on the spot because there are two teammates that have worked in other districts in the most recent future. But if there was a example of the perfect staffing formula to improve student achievement, like we just apply it, we just copy and paste, right?
Sure.
I do know the most important thing that I can do as superintendent is hire the best possible principal for every school. That's a given. But given your experiences and what we're looking at here, we haven't really talked about this conversation, I'll put you on the spot. When you think of how we staff our schools and the additional support we're putting, do you see things that make sense for what we're doing, or you've seen models that work differently that have gotten better results? Just speak clean. I'll go back.
Yeah, I think in terms of the additional interventionist and the additional APs, and I'm looking to our new principal at Middle School 5 in the back there too, because we come from the same background, I think we're generous in the additional AP allocation when I look at numbers. Not percent, but when I look at just the bare numbers, I think we're generous there. The interventionist, the fact that we're allocating interventionists based on need and not necessarily a formula, shows that we can be agile and that there's a need there, and just because you have 700 kids doesn't mean you only get 1.5.
Right.
You need 2, or I think about Frost having 3. Adding the additional interventionist happened right before Thanksgiving there was a need. I went to Devin, I said I think this would be what's best for Frost right now. So I think we're appropriate in that way. Can we be competitive in the other areas with principal pay? Absolutely, we can have bolder asks.
Rhonda, anything you'd add?
Well, I've served as a head of HR in several districts in the area, and most strongly in Pflugerville and in Fort Bend ISD, and there's no comparison with Central Texas and Georgetown in particular with what principals and assistant principals are making in the Houston area and in the Dallas area. And it matters. One thing I'd like to say about this chart, if you don't mind, is we are asking for an additional IC at Pearl. Gosh, is it needed. We have 1, she's good, she's been there a while, but we need 2. My goodness, Pearl is on everyone's lips. We need that second IC. I'd like to go to the incentive amounts, if you don't mind, and I'll speak about that from a lot of experience. And even Hutto, 2 years ago, I was serving as the principal at Hutto High School all year long. I lost my mind and agreed to do that at a very large 6A high school. The money I made there was 2 years ago way above what our high school principals are making now. God bless them. But where you say high priority school principal stipends, and Devin asked for 10,000 per schools at 50,000, that would only put them at about close where other school district principals are around here. So if you take someone like Angie, She's dynamite, she's the principal here. She can pack her stuff this year and go.
Please
And-
don't.
No, I'm having a stroke if she does.
Door, I'm trying not to come.
But seriously, her and the job that Melanie's doing and what Danielle has in her repertoire now, if it's about money, and some of them are young folks here, they can go right down the road in a heartbeat and make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 a year more. And that frightens me, and I know that's true. I served 2 summers ago as the assistant superintendent for HR in Bernie. I've served as the assistant superintendent for HR in Hutto since retiring, in Waco. So I've been around, and Amanda and I talk a lot about this. We're like, even for Mr. Coyle, right? I was telling HP, I'm like, well, I sure hope he comes. What's that? I was like, I sure hope he comes, cause I live in Austin ISD and I know what they make.
When the schools are open, they make that.
And so you gotta wanna come, you gotta wanna come here. Like, I loved working at Forbes. You could probably not even have paid me. You gotta wanna come here, because I'll stop right now. There's
No.
not a close comparison for
Well,
administrators.
And I appreciate the honesty on this. I think the whole board does. We do not live in your guys' world. We're a part of it, but we don't live in it daily. And so honestly, we appreciate the trust and the candor. And it definitely impacts our discussions and things we think of. Since you opened the can of worms, when you see these principals, and your districts like in Houston's and Dallas where they have these high socioeconomic, and you have these high paid, high qualified principals, what do their support systems look like in comparison to ours? And we don't have to have this conversation now or today, but think about it and we'll kind of revisit that. Like, what do those support systems look like that are around them? Are they proportional to what we're doing? Are they less than because the leadership is higher? Or, just trying to kind of paint that picture for myself. Again, I don't need to have that full
I think they're
conversation today.
comparable. I think they're comparable. What I've seen are comparable with, especially like an elementary, an assistant principal and a principal, and I see that as very comparable.
Okay.
And,
But Heather may have a different thought.
It's comparable.
okay. Yeah, the principals, it's been 7, 8 years since I was a school supervisor in another district in Houston, and I saw what those compensation levels looked like there. Our principals, skill-wise, could go toe-to-toe with those principals.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, when we raise compensation in one way, we're sacrificing somewhere else. And so it's class size in those districts are what goes up to have the available funds, so that unless we find another way to generate revenue.
Yeah.
So it's just something to keep in mind there. I really appreciate this conversation. Is there anything else you'd like to share or add before we close this portion out?
Thank y'all so much for everything you shared.
And we'll continue the conversation about the district level requests. So transitioning into our next part, we're going to have a conversation about refreshing our board budget parameters and our priorities. So again, just as a reminder, parameters are expectations. They're, as we go through these processes, these are the expectations you have of us as a district leadership team in how we arrive at ultimately the goals that you set. And so the first thing I'd invite you to do is just read through last year's budget parameters. And next, what I would like to add, excuse me, Renee, did Michelle hand us any slips of paper for the board? No? It's okay, no problem.
Got paper.
Huh? No, that's, yeah, it's, we're just gonna talk through it out loud. In terms of these parameters or expectations, is there anything that you would add?
one question I asked myself as I was looking over this at home is, are we being hypocritical when you look at item number C?
Yeah,
And then we just had this whole elaborate discussion,
that's correct.
do those focuses conflict at all?
Yeah, in terms of equity across all campuses.
Yes.
And, the idea that we have a proportional need
Yes.
at certain schools, so maybe that needs to be rephrased in a different way.
Good point.
Maybe, guess it depends, and I know this is a buzzy word, but equity has different meanings to different people, right? So I guess, I don't know, it doesn't matter. I don't wanna derail where this is going.
I
Yeah, but
think,
it makes sense.
I think your
It
observation
does
is
make
right.
sense.
I do
Yeah.
too.
I think it does. How do you define equity in this sense?
Right.
I don't think we have a debate necessarily about that with the board. I think nobody is dissatisfied with us providing more resources to the schools that are struggling. The reality is, with the voucher programs, the shift to charter schools, and
Right.
the way that's impacted other states, if we do not get our whole district up to academic excellent,
Yeah.
we will not be competitive in 3 to 5 years.
That's correct.
We'll lose students, we'll be in the same situation Austin,
Yeah.
Leander, these other programs are talking about closing campuses.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, you have to kind of raise the tide so all boats can come up at the same time. And if we don't fix those problems, we will never succeed in the long run and with a new environment. And it's, you can go to Ohio, Florida, Arizona, look at any of those
Yeah.
public systems that have succeeded.
Yeah.
And they all start with a really high academic base, and then they have phenomenal extracurriculars, whether it's CTE, you know, your fine arts, sports, like you have to be able to provide the things that charter schools will never be able to provide.
Professional pathways.
Yep.
I mean, you could change that simply by putting priority resources distributed across all campuses.
Yeah, I don't know how you reword it, but I think we're all in agreement, so.
Yeah.
You know, honestly,
Maybe.
I should have said this, but at the time when we did this last year, I think the thing we were trying to avoid was that, like, let's take high school as an example. We pour all kinds of money into a program at one high school and the other high school doesn't have that program.
For sure.
But, I feel like we pretty much stabilized that across the
I feel like
district.
we even fixed some things with bonds that were concerns in the community,
Oh,
like
that's right.
field houses and so forth, and
Mhm.
one school having something and another
Facilities.
school didn't.
Right, yeah.
That we were able to pass that when we passed the last one. That was-
So I'm hearing you loud and clear, something needs to be reworked about item C there, but
Mhm.
otherwise, the parameters seem to make sense,
Yes.
the way they are.
Yes, I agree. And I know for a lot of people, that particular word equity means more of equality of results, more than equality of even opportunities or resources. So if we were to look at a high priority school and say, in order to have the same result at this school, it needs
Right.
more resources, that's fair. And I don't think anybody would have a problem with that. I just wanna make sure the language, we don't like sabotage ourselves or snare ourselves with language.
Yeah, I'll rework something and propose it to the board for the next board meeting.
That'd be great.
Okay. We're gonna go to priorities, so I'm actually gonna read these out loud. Okay, so the first priority was competitive salaries across the board. The second one was, and keep in mind, that's when, last year when we did this, we were really not in the top third of competitive salaries. And, you know, we just had a conversation about administrators, but in terms of teachers, we've moved into a starting teacher salary in the top third. We had a priority of maintaining class size at elementary. We had CTE certifications remain, assuming programs are fully utilized. Extracurriculars remain, assuming programs are fully utilized. We had a staffing study of existing programs. And then we had a teacher compensation increase, so F and A pretty much lined up. But they're separate, right? We wanted competitive salaries across the board, but teacher compensation was specifically listed out there too. So, I did have a board member question about the staffing study of existing programs. And, I'm not sure where, Amanda's there. But in our staffing study, we were able to show that the way we staff all of our programs was equal to how other districts and other, and their programs are staffed as well as. Am I saying that accurately?
Yes.
Okay. Is that answering Mr. Scherer, did the way I explained that make sense?
My look was not because of your answer, it was because at some point you don't wanna compare yourself to surrounding districts as the
Sure.
bar, right? Like a lot of these surrounding districts I would not have sent my kids to, that's why I live in Georgetown. And so saying that our staffing is in line with surrounding districts, we're defining ourselves by these other people instead of what we're determining excellence to look like. And so it's a little, my look is more my thought process than anything, but I think when we look at the staffing study, or we look at existing programs or program utilization, number of students impacted, however we're gonna start defining these things, like we have to make sure that we're getting enough benefit, and I know Heather says she doesn't like ROI, I love ROI.
Yeah, when you said that, I was like, oh, wrong
I know, I thought
I don't care if it's one kid, you know, our ROI is not good. That kid will find something else they love to do in a group where they belong, right?
That's right.
So if these programs aren't impacting enough kids positively, well, let's put that money where we can, right? And when we're looking at staffing, like, we should start from an ideal. We won't always achieve the ideal, but if we're scared to look at what is that ideal bar, what does excellence look like in our mind, not what are other people doing that we don't even wanna be like. Like, pick a neighboring district and I can tell you, we don't want to look like them.
Yeah.
There's not one around us that I want Georgetown to look like in 3 or 5 years.
Well, I appreciate this feedback, and just goes back to the whole mindset of board member questions make us sharper as a team. So they're your priorities, but I would recommend you keep that one so that we can continue to do a constant evaluation of programs. A question or a situation we're gonna end up walking into is, somewhere in the spring, we're gonna have a program to look at that arguably has low numbers. We could eliminate that program, but then the question is it the savings that we wanted to, like, is it a savings that makes a big enough difference for eliminating an opportunity for a group of, I'm making up a number here, 20 kids, right? And so, but those are conversations we can put in front of the board, we can have with each other, and then we can continue to talk through just to ensure that we're really looking at everything when it comes to budget.
Well, I just have a comment about, special ed staffing. It's not just a numbers, 20-to-1 kind of thing. You've got to get down to the nitty-gritty of the severity of whether that child needs help feeding, toileting. Behavior is only one component. So staffing special ed is much more complicated.
Yeah.
And I have looked forever for my staffing formulas that I used to use. And I think that's really how we need to go with special ed.
And I actually would recommend, given your feedback, because there is a lot of staffing that goes into special education. Maybe a part of this that's an additional letter is a staffing study of special education staff. I mean, would you say that's something separate that should be studied by the district in order to ensure efficiency?
Would it be separate from bilingual, or, cause even that probably has some nuance to it.
What I heard earlier, that our numbers are so much higher than national numbers, I think it needs to be a more holistic look at special ed in general and how come our numbers are so high. And where we're putting kids in that shouldn't be in, or we're failing to graduate kids out of it and get them the support they need, or is there just a mass entrance into Georgetown for special ed because we're like, I don't know what the why behind that number being so
I
elevated.
think it has to do with our tiers. They're now getting back to where they need to be.
But if our numbers are that high comparatively nationally or even regionally, there's something differentiating that we should look at, because it's obviously staff intensive and budget intensive
It is.
to run, so.
Ms. Mulvey?
Can I ask you, is that 15%, that number, I've not heard that number, but was that 15% before dyslexia was rolled into?
No, that includes dyslexia nationally.
Surprised. I'm really surprised.
It used to be more like 12%, and even back in the day, they really were focusing on 10% before dyslexia.
Right.
But with dyslexia nationally, it's 12%. I just looked it up today.
So do we know what our dyslexia numbers are?
I can get
What
that
percentage?
information
That
for
would
you.
That would be, I'd be
Question.
interested just to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. that's
And I think all of
the other
that will
thing they
become
did to us.
part of a bigger, obviously, we're morphing into something that's not purely budget on you anymore.
Right, yeah.
You're
Sorry,
welcome.
we're in the weeds.
No, but honestly, this all relates to budget,
Right.
which all relates to, everything we talked about with instruction.
Right.
And
Right.
earlier, Ms. Blank, you brought up, I'm gonna paraphrase, that you suspect there's an over-identification of students in special education. I would hazard to guess that you are correct, because we've seen a skyrocketing of that number. Not just in Georgetown, but in other districts as well.
Mhm.
And so what that really speaks to is a lack of quality intervention, accountability to the intervention as well.
Correct.
So this could be a great future topic for a workshop.
Agreed.
Mhm.
Anything else that you would add, delete, or edit about these priorities? And remember, your priorities and parameters guide our work. Like, as we're doing things, we keep coming back to them as a team to make sure that we're honoring what you set for us. As you think about what we have to take on this year in terms of budget, any other parameters or priorities?
No, I think my only thought is we have to continue to maintain the class size at elementary until we get the system stabilized. I think increasing class size is a luxury for an organization that is where they wanna be and has all the support and everything around. So I think we're asking the whole K through 5 part of our organization do all this heavy lifting. There's no way to then say, matter of fact, lift a little heavier. And so, again, I think we have to be careful as a board to make sure that things we're asking you guys to do align all the way down to the budget. And so I don't think there can be a trade-off there at all. I think everything else is, yeah.
I'm gonna move us forward, and I'm gonna have, Ms. Hannah and her teammate, Mr. Oddix, present to you budget workshop number 1.
Thank you. I think, as Dr. Badville said, our earlier discussion is a really good tie-in to starting to talk about budget. Tonight will be our first budget workshop for the 26-27 budget. Kenneth Oddix and myself have been working together for the last couple of weeks, and so a lot of the historical knowledge and data Kenneth's going over, and he'll share some of that with you tonight, and then also kind of looking towards the 26-27 kind of budget. I wanted to touch real quickly on where we are with enrollment compared to the budget assumptions. And then Kenneth's gonna roll into talking about the 26-27 budget calendar, the general food service and debt service, the big 3 budgets that we talk about, and then kind of some factors that we already know that we're facing for next year. So let's just take a quick look at where we are right now after having second 2 6 weeks completed. That first column, you'll probably recognize, that was what we used for our budget assumptions. We used 14,131. That was the demographer's projection. I think the second quarter projection, we didn't back off from there like we had the previous year, because when we backed off the previous year, he actually came in higher. So we did use his enrollment or their enrollment as our budget. We used 13,141 for our average daily attendance, which is what we're actually funded on, and that was a 93% ratio. So then if you look where we are as of the second 6 weeks for 25-26, we are at 14,013 students, which is actually 118 lower than what we budgeted. However, our average daily attendance is at 13,122, slightly lower, 19 lower than our budget, and that's what we're funded on. And the reason why that's higher is because our attendance is higher. So adjusted for pre-K, we're at 93.6% right now versus the 93 that we budgeted. So there has been a lot of effort put toward by campuses and through the district, and so for that, we're seeing some benefit for that financially. So just wanted to, that's just a quick snapshot of kind of where we are now compared to where we thought we'd be back in June. And then I'm gonna hand it over to Kenny.
All right. Well, I had to smile when you said you love ROI, because in my background, the first half of my professional life, I worked in the private sector. Okay, I'm a money guy my whole life type of thing, so I value ROI. And so I worked in the public sector. I've been the CFO at Pflugerville, at Round Rock, did an interim at Del Valle, which is where I followed Jennifer and now followed her here. So through all those lenses, like that's how I've seen finance. And what you're gonna quickly find out about me is like my wiring is kind of three main things. One, I'd say I'm wired as a teacher, like to know how things work, but then this is how this thing works, okay? And you'll see that in some of the presentation tonight, and just in terms of, I call it the game of, okay, how is public ed working? How does the funding happen in the rearview mirror? How is it done? How does that lead us to where we are right now? I also believe that we're in a competition. We talked about talent and how do we get people and keep them and all that kind of thing. To do that, to attract and keep talent, it takes pay and benefits, and it takes a culture. What I'd say is somebody that's just started here in the middle of October, I wouldn't be here if I came out of retirement. I wouldn't be here if I didn't like what I saw coming in and living the experience. This is a good place to work, okay? So in terms of a carrot, we've got that going for us. In terms of the pay and the benefits, hey, that's what we're gonna be talking about in terms of what does it take next year. I think the biggest thing going for us right now is the culture. It's not, man, I'm coming to Georgetown because they pay more than anybody else type of thing, but hey, that takes money and all that kind of thing. So hey, that's kind of a backdrop. So start with the calendar piece in terms of how we're gonna be, meeting with each of you. So tonight we're in the first of 5 budget workshops. We'll come back in February and then every month through when we come to the board, first in May to approve the compensation. June, you'll be adopting the budget for next year. And then in August, setting the tax rates. So what I'm showing you here is what I'm call the one pager. And I've done this at every district I've been to. And it's literally the sheet of music to where what I want is that we're all singing from the same sheet of music. You're gonna be seeing the same numbers that SLT looks at, that DLT looks at, that, hey, this is in the first set of numbers that you see there, that's literally the budget that y'all approved for the year that we're living. All of these numbers are in thousands. So that first number of current year tax collection, 144 million. So ultimately, when we come back in February and we talk numbers, you'll see estimates in the 26-27 number. We're too early in the game to put that down, but those numbers will be filled as we progress through the process. Some of the things that are happening outside of like meeting with you, hey, when I got here in October, SLT had already been talking next year's budget. At that point, we're going to be at the December 18th, got a meeting with DLT and going to be talking, hey, the same sheet of music with them. And what I've always done, what we'll do there is simply take the best estimate of, hey, here's how much money we think we're going to have next year. We know what we've got this year, and right now, hey, we've got a balanced budget this year. Everything right now is nothing to say that we don't think that's going to happen. So that's like the measuring stick. Okay, if history just repeated itself, we just move those numbers over and that's next year. But what's going to be different next year versus this year? We know we're opening 2 schools, all those kind of things, so you quantify that. So that's what we're going to be doing with the DLT, is literally saying, look, for example, when we get into expenses, a 1% pay raise costs $1.3 million. Well, is there anything that we can reduce cost by that amount, or what has to be done? There's only this much money that we have to spend. What do you want to spend it on? Prioritize it and all that kind of thing. So that's the work. And it's right now it's just a hypothetical, but it's literally like taking an idea and saying, hey, what's the cost benefit of that idea? How much more money or how much more expense is each idea? Which ones do we want to keep? Which ones do we want to push aside? So that second line item of the VATRE, hey, if we did it, what's the plus and the minus? Hey, nobody likes their taxes to go up, but what are you getting in exchange for that? What would that money go toward? What is our competition doing? And you'll see in a slide what our competition is doing in terms of the tax rate that they have. One thing to just kind of let you know on line item 5 with investment income, when I'd met with y'all the first time I saw you in executive session back in October, I said, hey, we're going to do an RFP for an investment manager. Well, we've gone out to bid. We've gotten back six companies bid on that. We're in the process of evaluating that with the intent to ultimately come to you and say, hey, here's who our recommendation is going to be. My expectation is we will earn a higher rate of return. Now that's subject to just the overall market interest rate, but just an FYI, that's a change for next year that we're looking into right now. Then one other thing that last thing I'll touch on in terms of the revenue piece on line item 7, you see that acronym NIFA, that's new instructional facility allotments. When we open middle school 5 and elementary 12, we'll be getting additional dollars for that, and we'll quantify that as well. So that's it's on 2 sheets of paper so that you can see it, but we ultimately have a 1-pager that we'll be talking about with everybody. So the first slide was revenue, the second is expense. So in total, line 27, our budget right now is $140 million of payroll. Literally 88% of our cost is people. So, hey, whatever we do, we're not going to balance the budget on, hey, well, let's cut, we'll eliminate department budgets or something like that. It's going to be people is really where it's at. And people, when you boil it down, it's just A times B. How many do you have, and what are you going to pay them? So I know a lot of work has been done in terms of reducing staffing and that sort of thing. On the pay, everything that I've heard kind of around the table, like Amanda and that sort of thing, we're weak in terms of just the overall pay. Now we're meeting with TASB on January 7th when we get back from break, and I'm going to have them run scenarios of simply, hey, kind of 3 things. If we did nothing and we just repeated itself, what's that payroll cost? Then if you just did a generic 2% raise, but you got a market adjustment to where, hey, we were at least middle of the road, every position wherever you were at, what's that price tag? And then if we wanted to be better than just middle of the road, what is that price tag? So have them do that work for us. Next, line item 17, like I said earlier, each 1% that we do pay raise wise is about a $1.3 million cost. Medical insurance is a big number. When y'all approved the audit at the previous month's board meeting, if you remember, like our medical, we self-insure our medical plan, that had a little over a $3 million loss last year, okay? So we've got to look at what is it going to cost in terms of our projected medical cost for next year and factor that into our budgeted cost on the general fund side. And then opening elementary 12 and middle school 5, there's going to be incremental staffing. You're going to have a principal, all the federal staffing for that. Those next line items, kind of 20 through 24, are basically staffing decisions. Whether it's staffing efficiency, we're adding special ed look based on what was the discussion tonight, high school and middle school class size. And on line item 25, we're looking, and we'll talk with DLT about going to a triple tier route system next year, which would reduce routes, and that could be over $1 million savings if we did that. So that's work that we're going to be doing. So hey, this is in essence the template for the general fund that, like I said, there's no numbers in 26, 27, but when we come back in February, you'll see numbers in the 26, 27. There might be some more line items on there, and some of them might have gone away based on the discussion that we have around the table between now and then. Okay. So I talked earlier about the game, and I think it's important to sort of understand what's happened over the course of time, because when you look in the rearview mirror, it informs, hey, we're sitting here, and hey, it's always been hard, but it's like, why is it so hard? Okay. Well, this is going to give you perspective on why the game keeps getting harder the longer we play it. And if you start back at 1920, if you've been around a while, you know that 1920 was a real big year. 2 of the main things that the legislature did that year was they significantly increased what's called the basic allotment. And the basic allotment accounts for, back in 1920, it accounted for 87% of funding, okay? So, hey, if one thing accounted for 87, it's kind of like, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. Well, if 87% of the money is basic allotment, that's a real important number to focus on, okay? And so the total funding in 1920 was $49 billion across the state. That went up 7.3 billion over a 6-year period of time. So, hey, 7.3 billion, and that's a lot of money. No doubt it is. 15% sounds like, well, that's a pretty good increase. But then you have to peel the onion on that a little bit. When you say, how much did the basic allotment go up? That went up $3 billion, okay? But to give you perspective, if this is the basic allotment, and what they did in 1920, they said every kid gets $6,160, okay? So that was in 1920. In 24-25, that cut didn't change. Still got $6,160, okay? So when it says that basic allotment funding went up $3 billion, that's not from more money per child. It's simply there were more kids. There were 7% more kids, so $3 billion of that was just additional kids, okay? That's all there was. So when you do, what's the total funding per WADA, so you normalize for kids, then it's a $500 increase, a 7% increase. That's not much, especially when you're talking 6 years. Well, that's like a 1% increase per year, okay? So then, those numbers are in nominal terms. They haven't been adjusted for inflation. So that yellow line there, that's what it is in real terms. Because inflation during that 6-year period of time was 26.6%. So you get a 7% increase to offset 27% worth of inflation. So on a per kid basis, in 1920, we got $7,070 per child, per WADA, okay? In 24-25, it was less than $6,000. So it was over $1,000 less per child in last year versus 6 years before. Okay? So, hey, doesn't take long to figure that's not good, okay? So then, hey, payroll's our biggest expense. Teachers of that payroll are like 55% of our payroll, okay? So what did we do? What did that reduction in funding do to actually how we were paying our teachers? And what was that, if you were a teacher, what was that impact to you? Well, in 1920, our starting teacher made $48,000. That pay in last year was at $56,500 for a starting wage, so it went up $8,500, which was an 18% increase. 10-year teacher went up $8,000, okay? But in real terms, it went down $3,000 for a starting teacher, over $4,000 for a 10-year teacher. So a 7 and a 9% decrease in real terms over that period of time. Okay? So, and if you look at, here's kind of peeling the onion a little bit more. When you look at the funding per WADA, and if we were getting kind of funded, hey, we're getting funding, you know, same game applies to us as any district type of thing, we got 7% more money over that course of time. But we gave 18% increase in pay. Now, if you remember ESSER funding from the federal government when COVID hit and all that kind of thing, now that helped us. That was a crutch that the federal government stepped in, but that's gone now, okay? But that just gives perspective in terms of funding's down, like if you had one takeaway, our funding down, you know, from 6 years ago was down $1,000 a child, okay? So that was last year. What is the comparison of 1920 to this year? Because earlier this year, this calendar year, you know, over the summer, the legislature met and hey, they adopted, you know, their budget, put more money into public ed. So here's what happened in terms of our starting teacher pay. With what they gave us, our starting pay now for a teacher is at $57,000. So it's up $9,000 versus what it was in 1920. Okay, a 10-year teacher, because they got more with that teacher incentive allotment, they got more than a starting teacher did, so that went up 12.5, so 24%. But again, if you did put it in real terms, The starting teacher pay is still 6% less than it was in 1920. A tenure teacher is just treading water. I mean, they're still down like 2%, okay? So, hey, that's perspective. Nothing that's been done in public funding has increased the funding, on a per kid basis. That went down, as of last year. And in terms of the funding level that we have and then pass on to the staff is down in real terms, okay? So, hey, that's some history for you. Now, when we go to the lens of, hey, the competition look, okay? So, the vast majority, like if you remember from that first slide of revenue, hey, the vast majority of our revenue comes from property tax, okay? Well, property tax is our M&O rate, maintenance and operations tax rate, okay? So when you look across the top, that M&O Tier 1 rate, that's the rate that it takes to give us this basic allotment amount. We've got to be at that 61. There's slight variability between districts, but that's just because it's called an MCR, a maximum compressed rate. It's the rate you've got to charge at a district in order to get your basic allotment, okay? So our rate on the far end is 61 cents. Then the next rate are called golden pennies, okay? All the districts have that 8 cent. That's the most that you can do at that one is 8 golden pennies. Everybody's at that rate, okay? The next thing that a district can do is do copper pennies. The most copper pennies that you can do is 9 cents, okay? So Pflugerville's at 9 cents. Liberty Hill, right next to it on the left, they just passed a VATRE of 7 pennies. Hutto and Leander are at 6 pennies, and so their total M&O rate is anywhere from 71 cents for Round Rock, 76 on up there for Leander and Hutto. So we're at the lowest because we don't have any copper pennies. We're at 69 cents, okay? But here's the thing, if you look at the bottom footnote, each copper penny for Georgetown is worth $900,000.
Is that adjusted for recapture?
Yes, that's what our takeaway is, okay? And so that bolded line, the bottom number line there, is the funding that other districts are getting above us using our WADA, so normalizing for the number of kids, how much more they're getting because they're taxing copper pennies.
In other words, if we had their tax rate,
Yes.
those are the funds we'd be bringing in.
Right.
Okay.
So if I'm the Pflugerville CFO, I've got $7 million more than we do around this table, okay? And every penny for us is 1.3 million. So if I'm the CFO at Pflugerville, I can be paying my overall staff 5% more than we can because I've got that much more in funding than we do, okay?
But going after those copper pennies would be a one-time, if we used it all for staffing, would be a one-time adjustment. It's not something that would correct or fix the ongoing need to compensate for inflation.
Yeah, I mean, but here's kind of agreed, the caveat to that is we sit around this table every year and we do a budget, okay? The state does a biennial budget. So they met this year, they set it for the next 2 years. So they've locked in what the funding is going to be for the next 2 years. But what we don't know, like we're working on the budget for 26-27. When that budget is done, now we don't know what's the legislature going to do. Hopefully they increase the basic allotment, all that kind of thing for the following year,
Right.
and go that route. But it's a 2-year period of time that we're talking about. All right. Okay. Then showed you the M&O rate just in terms of, okay, for the taxpayer, if you talk total tax rate, because the board's ultimately going to adopt 3 budgets. The general fund budget, that's the M&O funds that. The debt service budget, interest and sinking fund, the INS tax rate supports that, and then the food service fund. So the total tax rate that the taxpayer is currently paying, we're at $1.05 here on the end. doesn't show up on a board. But you see that we're the lowest of anybody. You know, against Leander, we're 21 cents lower tax rate than what they are. Round Rock doesn't have any copper pennies, but anybody that's got copper pennies is anywhere from 6 cents to 21 cents higher than what we are. Okay. Okay. And I think here's something that might.
And so our reduced rate compared to surrounding districts is a function of not having copper pennies and a much lower INS rate. So bond management, basically.
Right. Especially for the for the first three, like Hutto, Leander, and Liberty Hill. Now Pflugerville and Round Rock, they're pretty,
Yeah,
they're right in our
ballpark.
neighborhood there.
But then they have the copper pennies in Pflugerville.
Right.
That's driving there.
So I'm assuming that to do the copper pennies, you have to have an election, is that right, approved by the voters? So are there disadvantages to having there's gotta be disadvantages or advantages, so I can see what the advantages are. What's the disadvantage?
Of the copper pennies type of thing? Yeah. So good segue into this. Give you, like Albert Einstein said, if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. I'm going to try to explain, this is kind of as complicated as it gets, but if you can blow enough smoke out of the room, you kind of get down to what's actually there, okay? So I'm going to talk in terms of these three cups and this Tupperware, okay?
Just want to see what his
That'll-
This sleeve.
Also, big fan of Rudy's over there.
Right now his wife's in the kitchen.
Big fan of Rudy's.
Regular Mary Poppins.
That's right. So you understand this in terms of the basic allotment. And so what all of these represent is here's how much you're going to get for that for the tax rate that you impose for the basic allotment. This is what you're going to get. The state commits that, hey, I don't care where you are, what district you're in, if you tax at that top rate, you're going to get this cup filled with money or with water type of thing. Now they don't say, and I'm going to pour all the water in there. They're saying first goes in your money, your taxes, anything that hasn't been put in will make up the difference, okay? But the recapture piece is if you overflow the cup, that money falls into the state's hands, okay? That's just the reality. And so Georgetown has been subject to recapture, and it's ebbed and it's gone up, and then they've raised, like, that's one of the big things in terms of reducing recapture. Well, when they just increased the homestead exemption from 100,000 to 140,000, that reduced the recapture, okay? But that's what's going on with that first line.
Mr. Onyx, I'm sorry, just so no one's confused by what you just said. The state doesn't allow us to take our tax money, pay all the money that we owe out, and then pay any extra to recapture.
No.
They'll take recapture, that puts us in debt.
It's literally a deal of, it's literally, and I'll give you an example. When I taught this summer as an adjunct professor for Concordia and had students from several different districts, and I said, look, literally their assignment was go in and kind of do work like this to say, okay, how much were you getting, how much was your recapture, all that kind of thing. There was a district out in West Texas that was heavy oil and gas, okay? And it was a small district, okay? So their recapture was like $200 million. I mean, it was a huge amount. You had like 1,000 kids, but your recapture's over $200 million, okay? So it didn't matter that they were so wealthy, that's all they were getting. So that overflow, I mean, that's like trying to fill this with a fire hose, and all the excess, that just goes back to the state, okay? So no, it's simply everybody's rule book. You're just getting, this is your walk away. It doesn't matter what you're doing locally or anything like that. Pour your property tax in, anything left over, state gets. If it's less, the state makes up that difference, okay?
And the state dictates our property tax rate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So they ensure that there's an overflow.
Here's the piece, just so kind of you know this.
Good racket.
It was even a better racket before 2019, okay? Because what happened before 2019, there was no compression. So every year when the values went up, the state just said, that's great. Now I'll just give you, if they went up 10%, I give you 10% less money, you know? And that's, so it wasn't until 2019 that they actually started compressing the tax rate, okay? So that's the basic allotment piece, okay? Next up for your viewing pleasure is the golden penny, okay? Now, reason that it's called the golden penny is that you see that that cup is bigger, okay? This is about 30% bigger than this in real terms. Like, it's like, this is say $100, a student $100 a wada, this is like $130 a wada, okay? So you're guaranteed, every district in the state is guaranteed to get this. If they do the golden pennies, they get this, okay? The other thing that makes it golden is it's not subject to recapture. So if you if you overflow that cup, you get to keep this too. The overflow, you get to keep it, okay? So, hey, if you have overflow, if you're the West Texas district, they get to keep all of that. So it's golden, it's not subject to recapture, and the amount is bigger, okay? So the final one is copper, okay? Copper is half the size of this. This is worth $100, this is worth $50, okay? Now, so the biggest downside type of thing is you're gonna have more recapture with this than you are with this. You don't have any here, you have it here, okay? And in terms of specifically to 26, 27, I can't tell you, hey, here's exactly how much it's going to be because I don't have property value estimates, all that kind of thing in, but it will be a number. I know though that the net to us is each penny is worth $900,000. So really here's the, when you boil it all down, the decision that you've got to weigh, hey, you've got to, you're speaking on behalf of the taxpayers and the parents and all that kind of thing. It becomes a deal of what's more important, a low tax rate, or I'm the CFO at Pflugerville and I can give a 5% across the board higher wage than what Georgetown was. That's from a money perspective, that's just the reality, okay? Nothing easy about it, but the state, when you've seen the same numbers that I have, it's $1,000 less a child. You're seeing a lot more districts, just like, hey, Liberty Hill's a poster child for it, and our neighbors, well, hey, 4 of them are in copper pennies. They used to not be, but in time, when the funding, when you're down $1,000 a child, then it becomes, push comes to shove, are you going to get more money so that you can keep the talent, attract the talent, all that kind of thing. Okay? So, hey.
Who came up with all this funding formulas?
Yeah, the funding, it's a funny piece of, like I started in 2009, and the first time I saw this, and first several, it's just, there's so many, it's kind of like you start, and I can kind of speak from 2009 forward because I've lived the experience, but it's every 2 years, the legislature, well, hey, we're going to do this, and then we're going to do that. And so it's an ongoing story that goes on, but hey, yeah, but hey, I'd say the most important, like if you understand these 3 cups, you understand more than 90+% of the population out in Texas, but that's really, when you boil it all down, that's what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. August.
All right, so I'm going to set the general fund aside for a second, and hey, the food service budget, this is simply the template piece. Our current budget broken out into the various expenditure categories, and when we come back in February, we'll have numbers in the 26-27 budget column. Then in terms of the debt budget, this is our actual bonds that are outstanding that will be outstanding as of December 31st at the end of this month. Bottom line, we owe $1.1 billion in principal. When you layer on the interest, there's another $731 million worth of interest. So for every dollar we owe 66 cents in interest on top of that. So we owe collectively in principal and interest, by the time we pay off all of these existing bonds in 2055, that's $1.8 billion, okay? Now we've got, when when voters approved the 24 bond, we've still got a little under $100 million worth of authorization for that bond. So once that's sold, it'll get us closer to, it'll be over 1.9 billion at that time. But that's our outstanding debt broken out by both bond and by year. So the final, like in terms of the debt service budget, the first column is our actual budget for this year. Then we've got a forecast, and if you look at the second line there, state revenues, the reason that number is different, that's called additional state aid for homestead exemption. So when they raise that exemption from 100,000 to 140, what the state is basically doing is saying, hey, I know I took that potential $40,000 worth of value that you could have taxed to get additional, to get revenue to pay down your debt. Since you didn't get that, I'm giving a hold harmless. I'm giving you money. When we did the budget, that wasn't set in stone yet, so it was kind of like an unknown number. Now we know it's going to be, closer to $8 million that we're forecasting. So what that does is it gives us excess money for this year in terms of debt service. But I'll be coming back to you at some point in the spring because it's called Senate Bill 4. And what Senate Bill 4 did is it basically said, look, if you've got money in that yellow shaded area, I'm going to reduce my hold harmless amount to you by that amount that's in the yellow. So got with Dan Wegmiller, who's our financial advisor, and said, hey, give me a scenario. I want to do a refunding of basically $7.5 million so that we don't have any excess there. We just push our, pay down that much more
So
debt.
essentially, we'll retire unfavorable bonds
Yeah,
with that excess.
Yeah, stuff that's able to be refunded, it's $7.5 million that will get paid off. And I can't tell you like exactly which one it is and all that sort of thing right now because that's what Dan is working on for me. But we'll get that, coming to you.
And forgive me, Jennifer's taught me this in the past. Can you remind me what hold harmless is succinctly?
Yeah. So hold harmless, and I'll just use as an example. Hey, I'm
Tupperware?
I can do it without Tupperware.
People won't understand it.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it ain't in a Rudy's cup, I'm not hearing it right now.
Here's
I gave him a Georgetown cup, but he wanted to use Rudy's.
So here's your Tupperware. Okay. So say that they hadn't raised the homestead exemption, right? So it's just $100,000. With that, hey, Georgetown would have gotten this amount of money, okay, in total funding, whether the state gave it to us or whether we raised it. And most of it's going to be from what we raise locally from the property tax, okay? But since, let's just say that I'm Georgetown and you're the taxpayer, since you got to pay me, you weren't taxed on, to use an example, say that you had $500,000 worth of taxable value on your house, and originally you had a $100,000 exemption, so you were taxed on $400,000. Well, now when the exemption went to $140,000, you weren't taxed on $400,000, you were taxed on $360,000. So I, as the district, lost $40,000 worth of property value that I could have taxed at 35 cents. I lost that, okay? So that loss is the hold harmless. That's the state saying, because I didn't get it from you, the state's going to hold me harmless. Hey, it wasn't my fault that the state decided to raise the homestead exemption by 40,000, so that's the hold harmless.
That's
Hey, we made the decision, we're holding you harmless, we're gonna send you a check for that.
Thank you.
We get it on both the M&O and the INS side.
And we have no significant debt retiring that's gonna change our INS rate anytime soon.
Yeah, no.
If you look at the chart that showed the annual payments, they're,
Yeah.
all- I mean, they do reduce, later, down many years, but they try to stay fairly constant. You can see the
Right.
amounts,
Keep the rate.
80 million, 81, 82, so, those payments are structured to stay fairly constant until they start, reducing significantly. Looks like maybe in 2039.
Right, so we'd have to make it 13 years without issuing more debt
Yeah.
to keep this rate where it's at, or push that debt so far to the backside of it that
Well, the other piece though would be what happens with our property values, because as those increase, it's a times B in terms of the amount that you're getting. It's the value times the rate. So if values go up, as values go up 10%, if you left the rate the same, you've got 10% more money.
Right, because there's no recapture on your INS side.
Right. Okay.
I was just looking for a scenario where we're reducing INS to
Got
add
that,
in the
yeah.
copper pennies to then make our M and O side.
So that's a
manageable.
conversation we've had, is as we, depending on the appetite of the board, something we need to continue to wrestle with is there any room in our INS to squeeze a little bit, if that meant that was part of the conversation of increasing on the copper penny side.
Yeah, and here's, to kind of expand the discussion a little bit, here would be my concern for us, and like, hey, in terms of making that decision, a big thing to consider is, around this table and like with debt, hey, we're talking billions. But at a core level, what do you know just from your own experience? The faster you pay off debt, the less interest you're going to pay, okay? If you finance your house over 15 years, it's gonna pay off a lot quicker than 30 years. There's just more zeros behind the number, but the logic is the same. So you could have a mentality of, hey, I wanna do what's best for the taxpayer, so I'm gonna lower the tax rate. But now the offset is, you're just forcing them to pay more tax over time because the interest rate is higher. And I give you context on that, like, the only vote I ever lost in the 9 years I was at Pflugerville was the first time I went at them. Our tax rate was at 42 cents. I asked to go to 50 cents, okay? It got voted down the first year, but came back the next year and, and it passed. And we kept it at 50 cents the whole time I was there. What that allowed us to do is we were defeasing each year, just like, what we're doing here with just because of the situation with the hold harmless. But we were intentionally paying our debt down so that then when we did our next bond election, we were able to finance that debt over 15 years. Historically, Pflugerville had always funded it over 25 years. We paid enough down that we could then, it was the biggest at that time, hey, money's relative, but it was like over a $200 million bond, but we financed it over a 15-year period. Well, that saved the taxpayers over $100 million. Between the defeasance and all that kind of thing, when you did the math, it was over $100 million. Well, okay, which do you want? You want me to lower your tax rate a little bit, but you pay that $100 million over the course of time? Because you're going to pay one way or the other. So in terms of I get the political pressure and all that kind of thing that you're faced with because nobody likes a higher tax rate, but it's also, hey, from a financial management of the district, that's a big component, just like it is at a personal level when you're financing your debt.
It's a very honest answer.
And once we put copper pennies in, what's the process to back them out? So let's say the state pulled their head out of their ass and finally started funding public education somewhere other than the bottom quartile of the United States and gave us money. Like, how would we back out of a copper penny?
Because each year you set the tax rate, okay, where you have to go to voter approval to increase the
But
copper penny.
we can retract that at any
Right.
time. Then if we wanted to add it again, we'd have to go back out to vote.
Yep.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay, and so the final slide is simply, hey, the big rocks for us in terms of next year. As I've shown, House Bill 2 that the state passed this year didn't cover inflation. We're going to be looking to see what we can do in terms of increasing teacher and staff compensation, health insurance. Hey, you can read the rest of them that we basically have talked, but those are kind of the big rocks that we're starting with for this year.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Does anybody need a quick break other than you guys did?
Okay. We're gonna move forward with school calendar update from West Benjack.
Take your props.
Yeah, do my dishes.
Rudy's. Have you had H-E-B work too? Pretty good.
It is definitely worth doing.
sending the clicker around?
Yes.
Toss it. Wes has got hands, just looking at your eligibility.
I don't know.
Money these days, we're starting back in shape.
Don't get me. All right, just a subtle shift of topic for you guys. Wanted to just do a quick update on our school calendar development process and where we're at. We do anticipate having a recommendation for you for the December board meeting. We want to talk through those. Real fast, our process started back in October. We sent out a survey to the community, parents and staff, asking if they like our calendar, what they like and dislike about our current calendars. And then, of course, they give a lot of open-ended feedback that tell us how we should improve it or what we should keep. We then utilize the District Performance Committee, or the DPC, to review that input with us. They review that data and then charge the staff with building calendars that honor the feedback. So we built some calendar options and then went back to DPC, whittled those down to 3 viable options. We then asked DPC to go out to all their constituents and essentially come back prepared to cast a vote on behalf of those constituents. We have representation from all campuses, community, and business as well, and as well as parents. And so they went out to all of their different groups and then they came back ready to vote. We had that vote on November 18th. And we also have instituted a new kind of process as of last year where we send out an at-large survey. So the community then has a chance to cast their vote individually. That survey counts as one more vote in the total. So we'll take a look at the survey. We had about 600 responses. You see the employee, parent, community member results there. The results were pretty balanced. But I'll draw you to the left side. First choice is really the one that matters. Essentially, that's the one that becomes the vote. So option A, by kind of a narrow margin, is the one that counts as one more vote from the community survey. Before we take a look at all the options, know a couple of things. Each one meets these criteria. They do have 187 teacher days. That's what our teacher contract is. Which is 183 of teaching days, and then 4 comp days, 3 of which are that we just had in November, and then 1 of which is normally in April. It's 168 full student days and then 2 half student days. There are 2 days of bad weather built in terms of minutes. There's a minimum of 5 days of professional learning in the school calendar. We do have a midweek start that is a very popular concept based on feedback. And then graduation and the end of school is before Memorial Day, another very popular request.
Wes, I'm sorry, do you mind going back maybe 2 slides? Right here.
Yep.
So I was trying to figure this out. Let's say for the first choice, there are 3 colors and 3 votes. Does this coincide with the slide before that? Am I to read that as 224 is employee votes?
No, slide before, this is just participation. So of the 600 responses, 202 were employee, 400 were parents.
So this slide has nothing to do with
has nothing to do with
slide.
actual results. That's just who the survey represented.
Okay, thank you.
Because when y'all sent the survey out, you asked everybody to put them in
In
a order,
rank
like
1, 2,
first,
3.
so
That's
this
right.
is that.
Okay.
That's right. Yep. So this is ranking first, second, and third choice.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't like doing what all the employees want and not what the community just wanted.
Sure. Yep. And you'll see that the DPC vote is representative of employees, families, et cetera. And that's what bringing in this as an additional vote is bringing in kind of an at-large vote as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet. I think we hit those. Any questions on kind of how the calendar is built? A couple other considerations. We have a teacher time task force that's continuing to explore elementary half days. You guys know we have some half days built into the calendar right now. We did not build those into the calendar options yet because we're so early in the school year when developing these calendars. We haven't really lived those yet. And so we're continuing to gather feedback on those half days, if they're having the intended effect, if that's the right way to get more teacher time as well. So we may seek additional feedback in the coming weeks or months regarding that concept. It's important to note this also dovetails with other work in GIC, especially related to operations and transportation, the half days as well as just the structure of the school day. Alrighty, so taking a quick look at the calendar options. Option A, this is the one that was selected by DPC as well. It has a Thursday start over there in August, which is familiar. It has a fall break in October, again familiar and desirable based on feedback. There are 2 PL days coming back in January, so this is kind of a new concept, but I think we're excited about it, give an opportunity for some diversified learning in January. And then spring break is the same in each calendar as 3/15 to 3/19, and that is in line with UT, with South by Southwest, with Round Rock, Leander, and kind of all of our surrounding, ACC as well. So those are kind of the big drivers of when is spring break. This year's spring, or 27 spring break, is kind of strange because it butts up really closely to Easter. So it feels awkward or different, but that's just kind of the ebb and flow of the calendars. So this is the calendar that we will be bringing forward as our recommendation, but any questions, we'll take a peek at the next 2 options, just as an FYI. All right, option B had a new concept in the beginning of August. We had a Wednesday start, 2 PL days in September instead of in January. The fall break did not have the PL day, but it does have the 2 holidays there built in. And then just, I think I mentioned that, just the 1 day in January coming back, and of course, spring break. And then option C, Wednesday start. We thought that was a good idea. It didn't end up getting a lot of love after people really kind of zoomed in on it. But two PL days in September, fall break in October, the 2 PLs back in January, and then spring break. What I will point out on each of the calendars, and it was a tough thing to grab, and just for listeners as well, Easter until the end of school is a pretty long haul. That's the testing season. And so it's really hard to buy a holiday in there, just given the testing nature. April 30th, I kind of begged and pleaded for a day if it made sense anywhere to put a holiday in there. And our assessment team felt like that was an appropriate option for us to consider in there. Otherwise, you're looking at a pretty long haul of straight run and it's testing season. So that's a grind for teachers, students, and families. So those are the 3 options. The vote at DPC was pretty obvious, but 17 for option A, and then you see the rest for B and C.
Can I ask you what it is that people liked about A? What the feedback was?
You bet. So it comes down to the familiar start in August, October, and January. Those are, I would say, probably the 3 big pieces that ended up being a significant piece. I think there was a lot of like for the 2 days in January. I think,
Wes, did that answer your question, Mr. McCall?
Yeah, it was just what the
Okay.
feedback was from DPC as far as what they were saying people preferred in this one compared to the others.
yeah.
Wes, can you briefly speak to the fall break in October and how
You
that
bet.
lines up with, because at high school, there's a UIL eligibility cutoff?
Yep. So our grading periods, we have 9-week grading periods, and one falls right there around kind of early to mid-October. And what that does for UIL eligibility is when at the end of a grading period, there's a grace period of 1 week later that allows incompletes to be cleared up. And an incomplete counts the same way as a failure for a student athlete or anyone participating in any other kind of UIL activity. And so if we have it to where the end of the 9 weeks is on October 8th, the grace period is set by UIL based on our calendar would probably be on the 15th. And so that leaves a very short window for students to actually try to clear up incompletes or get final grades updated. And so what we could do though is we could slide that grading period to, let's say, the 16th, and then the grace period would fall to the 23rd. And so we have our holiday built around the Columbus Day holiday on the 12th. So it does create a little bit of a wrinkle. There are kind of 2 solutions. We can leave it as is and kind of work around that operationally, or we can slide our grading period 1 week later. And there's kind of consequences to that too. So there's no solution that's a perfect solution necessarily. There's kind of
What would be the consequences of sliding it?
it would just you'd have a short week walking into the end of the 9 weeks instead of walking into the end of the grace period.
But the benefit is kids would have a full calendar week
The full
to
grace
clean up
period.
incompletes.
That's right.
And the pushback, honestly, that I was banned and going to, I think they were qualifying for state, but they had no idea who was gonna be able to be on the team.
Sure.
And so,
Yep.
it's not like they can just plug and play, and
Right.
so I think that was where that consideration first, when I asked Devin about it, first came up.
Yeah.
And then the more I've talked to people, the more it seemed to
Yeah.
resonate across all the UIL
Yeah.
guys, so I think that's where the curiosity comes from.
forgive me, because I know you just said this, if the grading period, if that period ended on the 8th,
Mm-hmm.
when are you saying that
It has
the
to be
grace
in the
period would
15th.
be? By
It'd be the 15th, more than likely.
But
So the UIL sets that grace period part. We send them our calendar and when our 9 weeks grading periods are, and they tell us when the grace periods are.
The challenge for the teachers was if a kid, if it has to be updated by the 15th and the
Yeah.
kid on block schedule doesn't come back to that class till the
Yeah.
15th, there
That's
essentially is no window.
Yeah,
There's zero time to correct it after that break.
yeah,
And
that's
so-
a fair point, because I was only thinking of it from the student's perspective.
Mhm.
And for me knowing my own kids, it's more optimal for them to, on the 8th, know what's necessary to tidy up their stuff, and then have 5 straight days off of school in order to do it.
Mhm.
But I understand how for the teachers, then you're really kind of up against it.
Right, you have a day essentially.
So
or
you tell your
less.
kid, you have missing assignments, but you have off Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday.
Get your homework done.
There is no, there's no excuse.
Sounds like my house.
How do they get their homework done without their computers at their house?
I mean, then,
Yeah.
My son doesn't bring his home.
High school.
Middle school?
High school has them.
He can.
Yeah.
We do not.
middle schoolers.
We just happen to have one.
Just call Wes,
I'll bring you mine.
Okay.
All right, let's see.
No, but, that is
It's high school has them at home, middle school
Yeah.
does not.
Yeah, so do you feel like, you know, I don't wanna gloss past that
Yeah.
fact, do you feel like we're gonna point out something else?
Well, let's just say, I think what we need to do is kind of better study what is the right solution. Knowing we have some flexibility when we set the 9 weeks grading periods, we'll better study what's the right way to establish kind of the end of the 9 weeks, being it kind of that 8th or 16th option. I think we need to get a few more voices in on it.
Okay, great, and the whole point is, we wanna give kids the appropriate amount of time to make up missing grades.
well, I wanna give teachers the appropriate amount of time to enter all that stuff.
Yeah.
That raging
able to
parents
compute.
finally got their
Yes.
kids to correct. The parents could have got on the kids 2 weeks earlier and not had this issue, but
Yeah.
essentially what happens is the parents like, oh, my kid can't go to state band. They get on the kid to make up the things, and now we bring these teachers back off the break they deserve
Dump a
to-
pile of papers on the
to
desk.
a
and say,
mess of
"Update."
crap and bitching parents and, complaining parents, sorry. And now we're asking our teachers in this comeback window to try to get everything corrected. And coaches are screaming and parents are screaming and,
Yeah, but Mr. Hurt brings up a good point, I mean, I actually just forgot it till Lindsay mentioned it. We don't have
Send
middle
middle.
school kids coming
Yeah.
with their devices, so they need that school time.
We'll kind of get more voices involved
Work
and,
it.
and work that problem and land on a good solution. Thanks. Let's see, I think that's all we had on that, other than, we'll be back at the board meeting with the recommendation. Thank you.
thanks, Wes.
All right. Topics just keep coming.
I know.
There's a lot of slides here for you to say everything's going smooth without a
Yes,
hitch.
You got it, sir, that's exactly right. But, the good news, is that, this will be relatively brief, because the proposals, the scenarios that you've seen so far, those haven't changed, right? So, nothing new on that, in that arena to show. But we are gonna talk about the feedback that we've been getting. We've had the community-wide survey, we've done a couple of town halls, and so got some commentary we wanna go over with you all. We did get, last time I was talking to you all, we weren't able to show the 10-year look. That was the consequence of, that we just didn't have that yet, and now we have it, so that's like kind of the grand unveiling for tonight. And then there's a couple of specific neighborhoods that have been giving us more feedback than others, and I thought it'd be worth talking about what we're hearing from them, okay? So, you'll always see this slide, it's our timeline, right, here we are in December. And just as a quick reminder, I think it's always important that we talk about the parameters. So folks who may not be fully familiar and seeing this, remember that we are doing this because we're opening 2 schools. We are looking at balancing capacity concerns at Wolf Ranch, Cooper, other schools, maximizing the utilization of our current campuses, and ultimately planning for future growth. We don't want to overlook that as far out as we can get. And then our parameters, I think we're nailing it on this. Ensuring opportunities for community feedback, making sure that our campus and departments are included in the process, recommending zones that help balance demographics, prioritizing plans for student programs, transportation and safety, minimizing the use of portables to the extent possible, and being transparent with plans for future zoning, facilities, and school needs. And I'll caveat that last bullet by just a reminding that we're not talking about the fourth high school yet, right? We're just talking about the other. This is a graphic that we've been showing. I just wanted to kind of bring it to y'all's attention. It is an attempt to kind of help folks understand that balancing priorities is difficult, right? And so when we talk about the things that we've heard our community say are most important to them, proximity to home. I want to go to school as close to my address as I can, but also I want to stay in a cohesive feeder pattern cohort with my friends. And please make sure our schools are representative, low SES balance. Those three things bump up against one another pretty harsh when you try to make these things happen. And so you'll see that represented in some of this feedback. I just want to say to you all and kind of play it on repeat each time we talk that we're trying really hard to balance these three things, but when you prioritize one, it topples the others. Try to give everybody a close proximity to home scenario, and suddenly your low SES numbers are really far off, right? I don't have to kind of explain how that works. So what we'll be talking about tonight, so we've gotten this just to show you the feedback. We've had two town halls in November. We'll have 2 in December, 2 in January, and a final one in February. And we've had 19 participants show up so far. 31 online form responses. That's going to stay open till the very end. So I want to encourage anyone who's asking you all questions, just direct them back to the form. Love to have more feedback there. So the summary, top themes. We've had there were 150 pages of comments in the survey. And excuse me, that's not right. We had the 31 respondents. There were some that were duplicates, and then we had the comments from the people who came to the town halls. That's what I'm trying to say. Mostly what we're hearing is they want to prioritize stability, especially at middle school. They're keep my friend groups together. Equity concerns for low SES imbalances across the district. Logistics, students being zoned further away from their nearest campus. We were like, I don't go that direction when I go to work. That's going to be in the opposite direction of 400. Transition fatigue, specifically in the Williams-Carver area. We've talked about that one before, and we are hearing some commentary on, and I think some of it is also just general confusion on what the options might be for them to choose to stay at Carver or Williams, for example. And then several remarks about special education, the impact on special education students, and how much more kind of dramatic and impactful change can be, especially when they get settled in and start getting the services that they're used to. So we have this conflicting priority of community desire for really clean feeder patterns, and unfortunately, when we run those numbers, within 24 months, we're back in overcrowdedness if we try to get a pure feeder pattern scenario, right? Parents are looking at this from an emotional perspective, and we get that. I'm a parent, and most of us in here have been parents in the district. We're looking at it from a mathematical perspective as well as an emotional perspective, and a lot more long range. And so balancing, trying to attend to the needs of our parents. Are saying, this is where I live, these are my kids, this is what I'm looking at for this year and next year, and we're trying to talk about 5 and 10 years from now, right? So there's some challenges in when we have to talk about splitting feeder patterns and thinking about schools being over capacity again too quickly. Yet it's bumping up against the running commentary. The biggest amount of feedback we're getting is about splitting up cohorts and splitting up feeder patterns. Okay, so just putting that out there for y'all, because I'm sure you're hearing it. If you're not, as our town halls ramp up, that's going to be probably a running theme. So how are we addressing the concerns? Proposals that have been presented do give capacity for 5 to 10 years for our schools. So I said your middle school does not determine your high school. So just helping us repeat that message, that just because you go to this middle school does not. We've had several points of confusion where a group that went to Benold, maybe now zoned to Tippett, but they still live in the GHS. Their address is still zoned for GHS, but they're insistent on the fact that you're changing us to Eastview. That's not true. Your address is still in the GHS zone, right? So that's just a message we can really help get double down on. Dual language students could potentially be at Williams or ES-12. We've been talking to some families that are concerned about losing access to the dual language program if they're zoned to ES-12. And then a lot more openness with our transfer options this year. We're not saying grandfathering, we're talking about being more accepting of transfer requests and considering being more open-minded to that. So really
Dan,
yes
can I
ma'am,
ask a question?
please do.
Could you go back that one slide and maybe, I guess the one question where you said transition fatigue and you said Williams Carver proposed new school.
Yes ma'am.
That one. My understanding was that those people in that area would have a choice as to whether or not they would go to the new school or that they would go to Carver.
Yes ma'am.
Is the district going to provide transportation to those students?
We cannot.
And that's, for that area, that's a real issue, that are affected by this.
Yeah, it's a relatively small geographic area. Those are very close in proximity when you're talking about Pinnacle and Vizcaya and West Haven, those neighborhoods that are mostly affected by the boomerang effect. But no, we're not able to provide transportation if they make that choice. That's just.
So they almost have to go, because if you're expecting the parents to transport, that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
With that particular area.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm happy to sit down with the map if anyone would be interested to look at that little zig and zag in there again and show where the roads make that transportation option not too complicated for parents, but it is something that we simply can't provide.
I didn't think we probably.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that.
Would be able to, and then if you'll go back to so when you say dual language students could potentially attend Williams or elementary school 12, are we talking about any parent, let's say, that's at Frost or that Ford, that wants their child in dual language? Are we saying that they potentially would have to go to Williams?
No, ma'am.
That's not what this means.
Okay.
If they're currently at Williams, right now, it's kind of premature, we haven't settled on programming, but given the demographic projections of elementary school 12, we would, if I made a decision today, I would say elementary school 12 would have dual language and Williams Elementary would have dual language.
So the kids that live in Wolf Ranch, that are going
They go
now
to Pearl. Yeah.
They're going
Still
to
go to
Pearl
Pearl.
for dual language, so they will still go.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're not changing that
No.
piece, just as other
This
pieces.
is just saying we're expanding dual language to
Okay.
school 12. That probably is the more
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
straightforward.
Okay, got it.
Good question. Does that answer?
Yeah, you did,
Okay.
yeah.
But you're also acknowledging just a real kind of tension that we kind of saw coming. If we wouldn't have rezoned a portion of Williams to Carver back in 2024, Williams would be over 1,000 students, maybe 1,100 right now.
Right.
But we knew elementary school, if the bond passed, elementary school 12 was gonna open. And we were just staring at that area and knowing we were gonna have to move it right back. And so, we hate that, but it was a necessary decision, at the time.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is new. This is what you asked for last time, and I was like just chomping at the bit to get to you. So ultimately, what you're seeing here on the top is the projections of our current enrollment for 10 years, and then if we rezoned in these scenarios, what that would look like for 10 years. So the best way to understand this is, what good does it do us to adopt this rezoning scenario for elementary? In this case, you see all the way out until 2030 / the 30-31 school year, we're at well below capacity in our schools, and
Right, so essentially everyone starting at kindergarten under this model would finish
Yeah.
5th grade
correct.
before we
they
hit
do rezoning.
capacities.
Yeah, 5 years is a good sweet spot for exactly that reason, yes, sir.
And just a little bit to add to this, going full circle back to our original conversations, when the number of students starts to balance in some of these schools, the staffing that we were looking at in terms of instructional coaches, interventionists, assistant principals, get to all be reviewed, which helps us with a cost savings to offset the cost needs at elementary school 12 and middle
Yeah.
school.
Okay. So, same charts, just for middle school here, you can see the pressure at Tippett, is really down till the 2031 school year again.
Yeah, so
So,
those starting kindergartners almost get all the way through middle school before we have any capacity issues.
yeah. So, I think these two plans really do address the primary objective, which is giving us that capacity to go the long haul. But also want to be sensitive and honor the feedback that we're getting from some families that don't,
Yeah.
that are having to get their heads around this, right? So we are gonna be updating the website with a new set of plans that'll have the same exact maps on them, but you'll see it, instead of called 1A, it'll be called 1B. And that's just because things will be explained differently. So if anything about a map changes, it'll be 2 or 3, like the version itself will change, right? But the numbers will be representative of projection numbers now, not numbers of our currently geocoded kids. You know, yeah, that's how you've been seeing me do it. Like if today's kids were rezoned, now I can take projected numbers and throw it in the mix as well. Okay, so just a couple of neighborhoods to call out here. We have heard from the Carver Williams. I've already covered that, and addressing those as they come up. There haven't been very many. We've actually had 3 online comments from that area. Okay, we had 1 comment from a parent from the Wolf Ranch to San Gabriel, that area we talked about. Just one piece of feedback from them, and then 1 person with a remark about Pearl all going to Wagner. So, but we've had 24 comments online from the Village Riverbend area, which is the area, if you think of the furthest east you can go in the Benold zone, when you get all the way over to I-35, Riverbend. And so I'm not sure if you guys have been hearing anything from that group or not, but that's the group that's had the most to say. They've come, and so bringing it to your attention that
We used to live in the River Bend, and
Yeah.
we went to Tippett,
yeah.
not Benoit.
Yeah, not been old. Yeah. So the misconception that we think we've cleared up, but it may come up again, and this is the group that, you know, they go from Village, currently Village to Benold to GHS. They would go Village to Tippett to GHS, but they think they're going Village to Tippett to
Right.
Eastview, right? And the north of Williams Drive, they go Frost to Benold to GHS. They'll go Frost to Forbes to GHS in the new zone, and that's been a relatively quiet group. And so I'm wondering if some of the misunderstanding of you're still going to GHS
Or they
is where
get
some of
completely
that's
separated
coming
from that
from.
group.
So hopefully we'll have more town halls that are sort of in that area. We'll be able to talk with those folks directly.
Can you put the new streetlight on the maps where?
Yeah, like where the streetlight's gonna be. Yeah.
I've gotten that question about 30 times,
Yeah,
and I'm
yeah.
like, it's on 29. I don't.
Yeah, it's at Parkside
Yeah.
Parkside Drive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Can we
absolutely.
just- Can we just show where that'll be,
Yeah.
and maybe it'll clear up some of the.
Noted. Yeah, I'll put an icon of a traffic light.
Yeah. I mean, I know it seems kind of silly, but.
No, it's
Yeah.
yeah, we get that question all the time too. That's an easy ad.
You know, I think one of our next challenges, or was there more than that?
No, just more information.
Yeah, well, this, perfect segue, because I think our next challenge is some targeted communication to different schools and school zones. No matter how many, Lana and I were talking, we feel like we're communicating, and I think our comms department is doing a lot on social media, but to some degree, we're talking in an echo chamber.
Yeah.
And, like, one of the things I think we need to address is, I personally get a lot of questions about high school zones,
Yeah,
right?
too.
And so I think we need to do some targeted communication to middle school parents about, this is why you're not getting an approximate, this is what the high school zone looks like, and, I mean, we could, but we'll be wrong in 2 years, right? And so, that way, all efforts to communicate will fail, but we have to try every effort. And so, it's kinda like with the bond, I mean, we did the bond, and we had half of our parents saying we were saying too much, and half were like, we didn't know you had a school bond. So,
I totally agree. That's most of the feedback I've gotten, is I don't understand why high school forward isn't being considered, why we're switching
Yeah.
middle schools around.
Yeah, maybe just something that explains the process, the why, and, I mean, we can guesstimate, but it'll be wrong in 2027. We'll have to adjust it.
So, any other questions? questions.
Can I ask one more question?
You
As
bet.
far as the Benel tippet goes for that particular area, is it the same option to transfer if students wanted to go Benel, if parents wanted to provide that transportation to go?
I'd say currently, yes, because we have the space for it.
You-
If they want to make that drive out, pack a lunch and fill up with gas, it's a long ways out there.
It's a whole-
Yeah, it is.
Okey dokey,
Okay,
thank you.
thank you, guys.
All
One-
right.
we can check the
I'll
record.
click.
This is
One
our
more,
last
you can
topic
click.
of the
Yep.
evening.
Yay.
Alrighty, so we have, we've been engaging in conversations with a vendor to consider adding cell phone antenna towers on GISD property. This has been something that we do have a very kind of minimal footprint of this currently. There are a few cell phone towers on GISD parcels that bring in a small amount of money each month. This opportunity is a little bit larger. So these antennas would be similar to the one pictured there. It's a multi-network antenna, so it would provide various network providers, not just one provider. So that's a certain benefit to the community. These potential leases are long-term leases, so these are 50 years leases. The way they're structured is it's about $1,200 per month per tower that has a 1.5% annual increase. But the kind of the lead there is that we would be able to negotiate the full value of a lease up front as a lump sum payment as one option, which that's about $1 million per site. And so it's a pretty interesting opportunity. The company that we're in conversations with right now has installed some of these down in Austin. They've done some work up in the DFW area as well. I will say I've been looking for them, driving around the Metroplex to try to find them, and at first I was like, these are nowhere, and now that they're everywhere. And so they are also kind of shifting their model toward, most of their market has been more municipalities versus school districts. School districts have been a very tough market to get into. We've not needed this kind of thing, but the demands that Kenneth and Jennifer were just explaining is causing the school district market to be a lot more fertile ground for this kind of work. And so they came to the table with this conversation with us. We've explored it, looked at it all over different angles, and feel like it's a really good opportunity for us. We've got some things that are built into the lease contract that would allow us a lot of negotiation in terms of pace of build out, as well as place and location of the towers themselves.
How many?
That number's not determined yet. We have around 30 different parcels. So they're kind of the next steps is this: if we enter into this agreement with them, they would be doing the feasibility study of which of these parcels makes sense, because they've got to kind of overlay network needs to be able to kind of sell, hey, this is a great spot for you to put a tower for the various cell phone providers. So 4 to 5, upwards of 10 could be a possibility over the next several years. I think in early conversations, I would expect that they come back to us if we enter into this agreement in late spring and says, hey, here's 3, 4, or 5 spots that we want to put towers up.
So standalone towers, no guide wires?
That's
no
correct. It's a
extra,
monopole,
so
150 feet.
Small footprint.
That's right.
And then who needs access to the towers in terms of vendors?
So they provide all of the access, all the vendors.
Right, so if you have like a AT&T or Verizon and someone else on there, all those people are gonna need access?
Yes, and they facilitate it through the company.
And they tell us they're coming.
Yep. And they don't deny us access either.
I would just be more concerned with them on near elementary schools than secondary type campuses.
And we have latitude in determining location.
Location,
and site.
specific location, that's right. And ultimately, the ball would be in our court as to how far we want to kind of expand this. Right? And we could say, hey, these 2 sites are all we want. But there's a pretty strong incentive to consider
For sure.
more than 2 spots.
Never bad to have more revenue than
That's right.
No doubt.
less revenue in this area.
No. So we'll have the contract language and so forth ready for consideration at the December board meeting.
Awesome.
And if questions come up between now and then, please holler.
Ladies and gentlemen, this ends the board meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.